hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here, and I was very fortunate enough to be joined by a guest hypnotist, Scott Sandland, who is the organizer and the founder of the world's biggest hypnosis conference called HypnoThoughts Live, and has recently launched a closed AI model specifically for hypnotherapists. So you're going to hear my conversation with Scott, where I ask Scott how he started as a hypnotist, what he learned along the way, some of the issues that he had to overcome, and what was involved in what became the biggest hypnosis conference in the world. Where did that come from, and how did it get to be that big? What makes it unique? And then we have a bit of a chat about artificial intelligence and how it poses a threat, but also an opportunity for hypnotherapists. So if you're interested, find a nice place to relax and hear this conversation with myself and Scott Sandland. Take care. Hi, it's Adam here, and welcome to The Hypnotist. Only today, I'm not your hypnotist. We have a guest hypnotist, and I'm joined by the very well-known Scott Sandland. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Great to have you here. Now, most people will know you as the organizer, alongside Stephanie, and the founder of HypnoThoughts Live. But I'm curious, before we get into HTL, I'm kind of curious about how it all began for you. What's your origin story?
Yeah, I'm a hypnotist. It's funny. People do think of me as just the HypnoThoughts Live guy, and I understand why. But I was the world's youngest hypnotherapist for a couple years, and my only job I've ever really had is hypnotist. So I started off seeing clients, like actual therapeutic clients, when I was 19. And I got certified when I was 18 and got way into clinical real early and was doing a lot with pain control and medical and dental by the time I was 22.
Now I'm saying that because it was strange for me being a teenager, being interested in hypnotherapy. And for me, it was kind of dark demons and kind of personal stuff that I was trying to kind of figure out. What was the catalyst or the cause of the fascination into hypnotherapy for you?
Yeah, for me, it was really practical. It was pain control. I was a water polo player through high school and college, and I got into a car accident where I ended up on pavement and, really hurt a lot of my body. And I found out the amount of opiates I would need to control the pain was an amount of opiates that would ruin my life. And so I started a journey looking for what I could do. And that was physical therapy or surgeries or acupuncture or whatever, just to get out of pain. And I went to a woman who is this wonderful hypnotherapist. And I said to her, I was like, my girlfriend told me at the time, she's like, you have to go to a hypnotist because it really helped me with my tennis serve. And I was like, no, this isn't a tennis serve. This is physical pain. And I don't even think hypnosis is real. But I relented and went because I was desperate. And so I went to this woman and I said, I really want this to work, but I don't believe in hypnosis. And she just wasn't impressed by that. She goes, no one does. Sit down. And she helped me, immensely. In that first 45 minutes, I became a believer. And so, that's sort of how it got me. Was I was a client getting out of pain. And then because so many of my friends were athletes, they had chronic pain. So like any teenager does, I was just parroting, the session back to my friends when I got home and, doing pain control work without having a clue what I was doing or why, and just kind of the best I could remember. And I wasn't good at it, obviously, but I was just good enough that it got interesting. And so there I went. And credit where credit is due. One of the people who I read his book and I reached out to him, and this is like there's barely an internet in this story. This is the 90s. Um, I reached out to Roy Hunter and I said, I read The Art of Hypnosis a couple times now. I'm a I'm a broke kid. How do I get good at hypnosis? And he helped me find instruction, and the rest is history.
Because I remember being 21 years old, just finishing a psychology degree, handing out photocopied flyers to letterboxes to try and get my first hypnosis clients. And I think I sold myself on a limiting belief, which is who's going to want to work with a 21-year-old hypnotherapist? I don't have enough life experience. And now I see it as a limiting belief. So I read a book by Richard Bandler and John Lavelle called Persuasion Engineering,
Sure.
where I applied NLP and hypnotic language to sales, and then that kind of took me off in a different direction. But I'm kind of curious, what barriers did you encounter being a young hypnotherapist? Was it prejudice, judgment, or what were the things?
Definitely those, and logistics. Like I didn't have the cash flow to get an office. So not only, and also I have a young face, and especially did when I was younger. And so I was 20, but looked 12.
Hmm.
And I was showing up at your house to hypnotize you for a serious issue. And the the credibility deficit that you're getting out of in that moment is real hard work. Um, but that's sort of like altitude training. If you can do
Yeah.
that, then it just keeps getting easier and easier the older you get. And I remember working with a client. This was a couple of years later, but I was in clinical offices at this time. In fact, I was in a dental office when this dental patient I was supposed to be seeing for a dental issue, teeth grinding, uh, told me he was getting divorced, and it was an ugly divorce. And and he looked at me and he said, "I'm telling you about my marriage falling apart." And he was very frustrated and agitated as he deserved to be. And he said, "I'm telling you about my marriage falling apart and what's going to happen to my kids. And you look about 17. How the hell are you supposed to help me?"
Hmm.
And I looked at him, and just the words that came out were so great. I got really lucky. Uh, I just said, "Because I'm really good at what I do." And I didn't say anything else. I didn't qualify it. It just, as a reflex, came out.
Hmm.
And he looked at me for a second and went, "Okay." And so there's a couple of these moments that I can think back to where I was absolutely underestimated. And understandably, being in a job like this where so much of it is about, like you said, life experience, to have those moments where you're called out because you are at the deficit of life experience. And so what you have to bring is the expertise in your subspecialty.
Hmm.
And so I learned to stand on that, and I learned to stand on the homework I had done to feel proud enough of it.
Yeah, having the congruency based on what you know, and
Totally
it does
that.
remind me because I also had a baby face, and my first career working in a radio station, I think I looked about 12, and I was like, kind of 21, suit that didn't fit me. But I found like the verbal communication gave me a real ability to kind of figure out. So I'd be speaking to these 45-year-old marketing directors, and the body language was all like this. And
Yeah.
what I found is that as long as I knew a lot about my particular thing, which was radio, I could see them almost unlocking and kind of shifting and then leaning forward. And you get a lot of sensory acuity, I think, when you are perceived to not have the credentials. You get very good, to use your training at altitude, kind of metaphor there, at kind of knowing when you've got them on side, when you actually have sufficient credibility and rapport to actually even start doing the work.
You also are inherently disarming
Mm.
because they're thinking less of you, or whatever. And so because you're disarming, their guard is down, they're gonna show more of their tells, and you can utilize asking for help, which I did a lot of. Um, And I think if people early in their career, especially if they're young, but even if they're just early in their career, if they do a really good job of asking for advice and not help, they're going to get more help. It's one of those things where if you ask for
Mm.
advice, you're going to get money, and if you ask for money, you're going to get advice. And so if you just go asking for advice from these people, they're going to end up helping you
Mm.
because they're all helpers, and that's how it gets started. So I learned that I could just lean on my youth as an advantage with them being disarmed and then them wanting to help me and pay it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think a lot of people that have the experience, and we see this, that a lot of therapists go through kind of a pathway of they become a very good therapist, they start helping people, and then there is a desire to take what they're good at and then kind of teach other people that skill set, which is kind of like the basis of a conference. Do you find though that sometimes that some people lose touch with the actual kind of therapy and actually kind of working with clients, that they stop being a therapist and they become a trainer or they become a mentor, and then they kind of lose access to the
Yes.
source?
Yeah, I totally do. And for years, even as I was, getting very busy and all the other stuff I was doing, HypnoThoughts, AI, all that, until I moved here a year ago, I maintained a client base for that reason, just to stay, you know, having clients front of mind.
Mm.
So even when it was, a small percentage of my my week, it was really, really important. I also think we have gotten as an industry really good at teaching each other techniques. I think we're really good at transmitting those from one person to another. Uh, I don't think we are all that good right now at teaching all the other things that go into being a great practitioner. Um, and the hard decisions and the judgment calls and the ethics and the real world situational just awareness. I think that's the stuff that makes staying in the weeds valuable. It's not so that, my element induction stays sharp. It's so that and I understand scope of practice, but I'm just going to call it clinical acuity. And kind of that space that needs to stay sharp. So that's why I totally agree with you.
Mm. And I think that's why a lot of the value in conferences is the conversations that take place out of the rooms where people are teaching. It's that someone shares an anecdote or someone shares a difficult kind of client situation, and then a couple of people pitch in and say, "Oh, I'd handle it this way." There is this hive mind almost that when you're just surrounded by people doing a similar thing, you get more group intelligence than if you're this solitary individual. Because therapists are quite solitary creatures. We see our clients, but we're not really interacting that much with other therapists.
Oh, I could not agree with you more about everything you just said. Like, first, the loneliness, to take it in the opposite order. I don't get to be a real human being completely myself with my clients. My clients don't want me to be that, and I understand why. If I go to the doctor, I don't want him telling me about his weekend. I want him, focusing on whatever hurts. Um, and the same is true for our clients. And so I don't get to be myself. And they're happy they got better, but it's I love my wife and kid very much. They don't understand what a hypnosis session's like, so they can't truly appreciate what was hard and good about my day. And so this career path is pretty unusual. There aren't a whole bunch of people that can connect with it and connect with you on it. So it is isolating. And so having these in-person encounters where we can see each other and we can truly appreciate what we're all going through. And I was talking to one of the HypnoThoughts Live presenters the other day, and he said, I talked to a few people at the conference. They said this is a stage of the career, and I'm totally in this stage of the career, and it sucks. And I'm just really glad that multiple people told me this is a stage they went through. And like just that sentence I think is what we need, and that's how we get so much value. So actually, as we're moving to Atlanta in the conference, to get way ahead of myself, but Stephanie and I are spending a lot of time thinking through how to maximize that because uh, so much of the basic education can be done so effectively online now. What's the best value of an in-person community weekend? So totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, that I mean and it's the right kind of question to ask when so many things can be remote and you're an email away and you're kind of a resource. It's like where's the value in actually the conversation element? And I think it is empathy, and I think it is connection, and I think it is understanding. Like those things make a difference. Like you're in it with other people. It's that horror movie psychology that it feels safer if two people go down to the basement than just one.
Right.
Like we're all in this together. I'm kind of curious
And
though,
there's a
before we,
1+1 makes 3 thing where
yeah,
it's greater than the sum of its parts. And it's not 1+1. It's 14 plus, another 3 or 4 wandered up to the conversation. So it's these really big network effects. But sorry, I interrupted.
yeah, network effects is the right way of thinking about it because you've got, you know, learning from one person plus a distinction from someone else, and then it's almost the fusion of multiple things compound that you don't really get if it's just even like a single mentor. Like it is
Yeah.
the exponential element. But I'm kind of curious, like how you went from being a busy solo therapist to effectively running the world's biggest hypnosis convention. Like that's it seems like a fairy tale, kind of like how does someone like get, because you don't strike me as like, I wouldn't want to guess your age, but you're not an old guy. So
Sure.
therefore, like, I'm kind of curious, like, what was the catalyst for you to kind of suddenly have this thing that you built?
The truth is so weird. Um, so I built hypnothoughts.com, which was called the MySpace for hypnotists because it was before Facebook was important. So there were these things called Yahoo groups that basically were the online platform for what are now called meetup groups. But these Yahoo groups were these really simple, very just black and white, no text editing, no embedding a YouTube video, just forums in an early internet. And I was in them and getting mentored in them and sharing ideas in them. And I thought the tech sucked. And I was not particularly techy, but I was fine. I was just the right age. Um, and the long story short is I was at a party and me and my friend were at a party. We both struck out with the girls we had been set up with. And we got set up with these girls, and there was this really fun UFC fight on. And so we started watching Georges St. Pierre win a title belt. And the girls were like, these guys are idiots and left because we were dumb. And the guy said, hey, I just saw this thing where you can build your own MySpace. And I said, why the hell would you want to build your own MySpace? There's already a MySpace. And he goes, yeah, but you can have one for like your own thing. And I go, like, what? He goes, well, you can have one for hypnosis. And so I said, okay. And I pulled out my BlackBerry and I registered that website and didn't do anything with it for almost a year. And then one of my mentors passed away. And when she passed away, people didn't really have websites and blogs that they could easily edit. So I just posted my eulogy to her there on this thing that I had just kind of sitting dormant. And I shared it with some of our acquaintances and friends and said, hey, if you want to say anything nice about Janet, here's where I wrote, sort of my eulogy to Janet Macy, and you can do the same. And people did, and it organically turned into the community. The software allowed it to be. And so then I learned how to run a social network platform as I went by accident. And in year 2, we started adding 200 new members every month. And we did that for the next 3 years straight. And we never spent a dollar on advertising or marketing because I never wanted to do it. I just wanted to keep seeing clients.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden we had 25,000 members, 30,000 members on this website. And they said, let's go to some conferences. And we said we were going to go to the NGH conference. We asked them in advance if we could. They said no. And they were kind of upset about it. And so we said, well, if they won't let us do it, let's just go make our own fun one. And we built a conference and really positioned ourselves as the fun place to learn this stuff. We're not certifying you. We're not taking this seriously. We just want to learn cool stuff and be cool to each other. And that resonated. And 15 years later, we're the biggest in the world and have the coolest support from presenters and attendees. And the culture is just incredible. So that's my long answer on how we got here.
I mean, it's a fascinating story because I love it when things happen by accident, but there's almost this kind of intuitive thing where, because you could have heard that and it could have just been ignored, but there was something within you that kind of connected. Oh, let's give that a go. And then the positive reinforcement of people joining it. And
Yep.
that sounds very similar to my story of my podcast. Is kind of like roll the dice, see how it goes, and then suddenly it grows, and you're like, oh shit, like this is a thing now. And I think that's a wonderful thing that you've kind of were able to kind of see the opportunity grow it. What do you think was it about the NGH? Do you think they already saw you as a threat, or was it politics? Like what? Because it seems bizarre. Like if you've got a big community, that's the kind of person you want to come at a conference to sell loads of tickets, you know?
So the truth is there was another guy who was important at the NGH who was building a competing site with HypnoThoughts.
Right.
And we launched them about the same time, and it was just coincidence. But he got real and really wanted to fish that pond for his community, and did not want me around. And he was a real loud voice in the important room at the NGH, and so he really led a charge against me that created arguments and yelling and fights at the conference that I never attended. But it backfired for him tremendously because he sent out an angry email to his entire mailing list saying what an awful person I was for doing it, and sent them a link to my website as evidence. And then they all just joined because it was good and friendly. Like it was just such an obvious self-own. But yeah, it was just one guy who was ambitious and didn't understand the importance of community, just absolutely sabotaging the relationships, sabotaging his own business and interests, and really accidentally propelling me and doing more positive good for my career and competitive nature to come out and did all the things that really made all this possible. So I guess we owe Cal Banyan a thank you, because that was all. Thanks, Cal. Anyway, so that's how it happened. He was angry at me and did not want my people or my community, a website, anywhere near the NGH. And they threatened our presenters for years with, if you speak there, you can't speak here, and all sorts of stuff. And we never fought back because it's not a fight. Like we're a website for people who think hypnosis is neat. Like, calm down. And and that level of we're just here sincerely because we like this resonates with this community.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes the thing itself, which is opposing, fuels the very thing. Like I remember years ago, all the London taxis striked on one particular day because they were mad at Uber. And then suddenly everyone had to download Uber that day because they couldn't get around London. You know, it was just kind of like a huge own goal. But let's go back in time to the early days of HypnoThoughts. So you had this idea, like the NGH was kind of blocked. You've got this thriving community. How did that go from, hey, let's put on our own conference? And I don't even know where the first conference was. Like I'm not too, clear on the backstory.
So I'm a big fan of hypnosis conferences. When I launched HypnoThoughts, HypnoThoughts Live, I'd been to over 40. As an attendee, as a presenter, as a volunteer in the back, as the guy running cables to wire up the virtual conference. I had been kind of at every seat, that you could have besides organizer. And so I knew what I enjoyed as an attendee and as a presenter, and I knew what attendees and presenters bitched about behind the scenes, which is a reasonable thing for people to do. And so because of that, I had enough domain knowledge to say, if we were going to put one of these on, these are some of the things that I would want to do that make it different. And I just started putting together that. The first one we did was in Vegas. It was at the Orleans Hotel. We did 10 at the Orleans, or 11 actually, at the Orleans Hotel. And we had 200 people the first year, attendees and presenters combined, and we were shocked that the number was that good. And people really liked the idea of, because there weren't really any conferences besides the Mid-America conference. There weren't any conferences that weren't connected to a certifying body, because you had to have a mailing list. And before the internet, that was like nobody had those. And so the idea of getting that many butts in seats was hard. And because we had the website, we all of a sudden had the ability to get butts in seats at scale. And so then we could do it at the Orleans and grow.
Yeah, and I remember my first HypnoThoughts was the final year at the Orleans, so I had a little kind of taste of that before it moved to the Sahara. And how have you seen it change like over 15 years? Because I imagine like you've seen a lot of kind of differences and kind of good things, bad things.
A lot's changed. I would say, well, this isn't what your question is, but I'll say I have learned more about running a conference since year 10. Like year 10 to 15, I learned more than I did in the first 10 years, which it was surprising to me. And part of that is because in the last 6 years, we had COVID, and we had a couple other things that were just normal adversity. One of the reasons why we moved was the hotel incredibly jacking up prices once they run into problems and shortfalls, and the casinos are making decisions and all that stuff. So we learned a lot about that side of things, but also what's changed like for our people. Pre and post conference has changed dramatically since COVID, and how people want to invest their time for learning has changed a lot because online learning has gotten so good. So when we moved, we optimized the Sahara for pre-conference. And as we're moving away from the Sahara into Atlanta, we are optimizing the conference no longer for pre and post conference, because what we're seeing the people need is a different kind of conversation. So there's a lot changing all the time. And when people wanted certifications and they care less about certifications now, stuff like that. So there's a lot, and it's our job to kind of pay attention to that.
And I heard the COVID year was a strange year in the sense that there was kind of a virtual version of kind of HypnoThoughts. And during that COVID period, I was invited on lots of virtual conferences, and there was just this whole year where every conference was a virtual conference. And I guess there must have been a part of you that was wondering, like, is it ever going to go back to like normal conferences? But there's a need for that connection, I think.
There was, I put out a couple of videos during COVID, where I was just like stream of consciousnessing, because we were all sort of locked in and crazy. And so I made a video where I said, I really hope we don't go to all virtual. It would be much cheaper to do. It would be easier for me to get more people watching, but I know we would lose something really important. And the COVID year where we did hybrid, we were just the timing of what was going on with COVID and all that. The timing meant we could do one, like restrictions had opened up enough that people had face masks, and we had a whole bunch of social distancing, but it was hybrid. And doing that confirmed the decision we made a long time ago that you shouldn't do hybrid. Like, you can do all online or you can do in person, but you can't chase two rabbits at once. Like, it just doesn't work. And that was the year we definitely proved that.
Fair. And we're going to talk about AI in a bit, because this is, I think, a rabbit hole that a lot of people have jumped down, and also a scary monster that a lot of people are worried about. So we'll get to that in a bit. But recently at HypnoThoughts, we're only going back, 3-4 weeks ago, you made a big announcement that you're moving from Vegas to Atlanta. Talk me through that decision and how that came about.
Well, I never wanted to be in Vegas. I actually hate Las Vegas, and so does Stephanie. But when we started, Vegas made sense because it was cheap and they subsidized a lot of stuff. And There were cheap flights and cheap rooms, and the casinos were all about doing that. And so we could do it because we could justify very cheap prices during the summer, get everybody in, and we know what early stage career hypnotherapists' budgets are. And so we just want to be conscious of those people and also having money in their pocket so that they can spend that in the vendor room because I want to support the vendors. And so that was why we were in Vegas in the first place. But the economics of Vegas have changed in the last couple of years. They're no longer doing any loss leader stuff. They're just putting the screws to you everywhere you can. And so everybody was feeling that, and it just doesn't feel good. So that was the first piece. And then we started just looking around. We wanted to hit a place that had a major airport hub. We wanted so that it was easy, especially for the international people to come in, because we have so many people come in from Europe and South America historically, although not this last year because of politics. But bringing in the international, we wanted it to be a big hub, and so we ended up with 44 venues on our first cut list, and we contacted all 44, started doing work, got it down to, geez, somewhere in the teens pretty quick. And once we got it down to about a dozen, the hotel in Atlanta, the Cortland, blew everybody out of the water once we got into that like final 10. Like their presentation, what they want, their vision for how to work with us, it was exactly what we wanted to hear compared to everybody else. So they actually made it real easy. After a long process, the finals were real fast.
And I imagine, like with any change, there's an element of risk. What do you think the biggest risks are with the change to a new city and time of year as well?
Yeah, I mean, switching to November, and now there's like 14 or 15 other hypnosis conferences. So once we knew we were moving the venue, we knew we were going to have to move dates because the venue required it. And so we knew we were going to have to step on toes, which sucks. So we reached out to the conferences and tried to, work with them as much as we could and put an 18-month lead time on it. So hurting the other conferences was something we were concerned about because we've got a big footprint, and just stepping on toes sucks. The idea of putting the conference together, there's so many elements that have to align. It's one of the reasons we're leaving the Sahara is the shape of the building is wrong. The shape of the building creates little isolating pockets that I thought were going to be nice conversation pieces, but they actually don't have line of sight to each other. So it's very difficult for people to know where on property people even were. And so thinking through these kinds of elements, like, man, a much better looking venue hurt community networking. And so there's a bunch of just unknown unknowns going into a new space. Like Stephanie and I are going there in 2 weeks to spend a couple days and just walk it and plan it and do all the work with the staff. And that's when we get to taste the food, and all those things are easy, but just the unknowns until the people get in and respond to it it's a big gamble or bet that we're making on the venue and the people lining up.
But I think you're, and this is an outsider saying it, and you may disagree, but I think when I look at HypnoThoughts compared to other conferences, it is the sense of community that is the USP. And I think when you've got that kind of community, effectively wherever you go, people are going to follow. That's my hunch.
I hope so. Yeah. I think we've done a really good job of creating community, and we've been really fortunate in the people who supported us really buying in. And that through line and that like vector is totally aligned with the people, which is just makes things a lot easier than it would otherwise be if we had egos and stuff like that. Because I mean, we do have egos. We're hypnotists, especially stage people. They have to have one to do that job. And so to have that many people who are used to being in charge play a team sport is really gratifying. And that's the way Stephanie and I really approach this. Is this whole thing is a team sport. and it feels lonely. But the people who are succeeding have figured out how to turn it into a team sport, and the people who are struggling tend to be the people who haven't. And so one of the things we're really going to be doing in Atlanta is helping nurture that, like not just community, which is great that we have, but kind of next stepping that into actually productively helping each other, and making it a team.
Yeah, it's and I think that will be the thing that really kind of galvanizes it, because it's already like, I think the strongest sense of what HypnoThoughts is. It's not a building, it's not a city, it's definitely the people and kind of what you and Stephanie have kind of built around that. When people think about AI, and I did a talk at HypnoThoughts about 3-4 years ago called the Digital Hypnotist, where because of COVID, I went from being a one-to-one practitioner in central London. Now I've got a recording studio. Almost all of my clients are kind of remote. I think COVID was a big catalyst to kind of get some hypnotherapists either embracing technology or not embracing technology.
I think a lot, yeah.
And the big new form of technology, which is a huge opportunity, but also a huge threat to the hypnotherapy kind of world, is artificial intelligence. And I know you're very knowledgeable about this. If you were to kind of sum up what AI really is to the average hypnotherapist, what do you see it as?
An exoskeleton. And when it's used right, it's a really, really cool one. And when it's used wrong, it's atrophy inducing or just scary. And right now, the way large language models work, it's very difficult for one to actually be a good, I'm going to call it therapist. They will be very good radiologists. There's a bunch of things that they will be good at. But therapy isn't one of them, and it's usually not for the reasons people think. But AI is really good at some of the things that we do need. And so I think, and what I'm betting aggressively on, and have thought about this a lot, I think what AI is going to do for all of us in this field is give us more of the clinical supervision and support and the combination of ideas that converge into creativity. Helping do those pieces is really where the AI is going to help us a ton. It's not about drafting emails. It's not about building your website for you. Those are fine little things, but how many websites do you need it to build for you before you move on to what it's really going to do for you? People like you and I are very entrepreneurial, so we'll come up with neat business ideas that AI can do faster. But most practitioners don't need that. They need other things, and so it's the AI's ability to scale you, but not decide for you. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about that piece of it, and how much what our job is being present, being a good listener, but also authorship, and helping a person feel safe when they feel out of control. And all those pieces and how we navigate that is actually quite hard for an LLM. But the LLM can help us to be better at it. So I can talk about this for way too many hours. So I'll stop talking right now.
But it seems like you're framing AI as an amplifier that for lazy people, it can make them more lazy, and for impactful people, it can make them even more impactful. You don't seem to see it as an existential threat to hypnotherapists, and I do. I think it's an existential threat to incompetent therapists, the ones that will read scripts and kind of not really do too much. And I think they will be decimated by very slick, online, very affordable kind of therapists that have access to every single technique and pattern and metaphor that's possible. But you don't seem to see it that way. I'm just kind of curious why.
No, I do see it that way. I just categorize things slightly differently. I think lazy hypnotists that are just reading scripts and not trying very hard are doomed anyway. They're just going to be doomed slowly by the market. And
Mm,
now we've built a thing that dramatically accelerates the time where below average is unacceptable. So I think AI replaces the hypnosis recording way before it replaces the practitioner. And so if you're Steve G. Jones or Scott Schmerin or Victoria or Gallagher or people who really go for selling recordings, I think it's coming for them first at the high level, right? So
mm,
low talent, low experience, low effort people are going to get hurt first, and frankly should, because that's how it would work in a meritocracy. And I'm fine with that, just as as just the reality of Darwinism. Um, and those people who are lazy and suck aren't doing a good job for the people who need help. So if we replace those people, I'm okay with it. Because this is going to sound maybe condescending, but like I don't professionally think of them as on the same tier as people who have done the work. As human beings and friends and all that, of course they're equals. But when we're talking about not the art of hypnosis, like Roy has famously coined, the craft, the craftsmanship that requires functionality. That, like if you make a chair, but no one can sit in it or it breaks, you didn't make a chair, dude. Like if you've got a really good induction and the people like smoke more afterwards, you're not doing a good job. Um, so yeah, I think AI takes away the low level in a lot of jobs first. The right half of the bell curve stick around a lot longer. I think recordings get devalued because what the recording gives you is a less customized, um, proven, uh, uh, repetitive, scalable, low costs, relatively high value thing for the money. And I
mm.
think AI is going to be able to do that for us a lot. But AI is also going to take that right half of the bell curve and make all of them, if they get it and use it right, it will make them better at being practitioners, and it will take them less effort to help more people. And so we'll figure out what happens in, the economy of everything. But I'm not very worried about the right half of the bell curve. Not for
Yeah.
a while. Not until everybody's out of work.
Yeah. And, and some people believe that that is coming. I saw an interview with Elon Musk and said pretty much it's not going to be too long before AI is better almost at everything than every human.
Sure.
And that's a scary thought, but equally there'd be a lot of abundance in that, if the economics can be figured out. So in terms of the use cases, because this is the bit that I've been thinking a lot about with kind of AI, is kind of like, okay, it's this very powerful thing, but if a powerful thing, like most people have heard the analogy that the average kind of processing power in a phone is more powerful than what put the original Apollo missions on the
Sure.
moon, and yet a lot of people spend time watching cat videos and not getting a lot of value from it. So if you've got this powerful, let's say, technology, you've been a hypnotherapist and you know lots of kind of hypnotherapists and presenters and trainers. From your perspective, what do you think are the most useful use cases where AI can actually add value rather than, let's say, kind of make people shrink?
Yeah. I think that's the right frame. Like I said, exoskeleton. So think of that the wrong way is the floating wheelchairs in Wall-E that just make you fat and lazy and have a TV built in. And that's the same thing as, a suit that allows a dude to lift 500 pounds and run, 100 miles an hour. So think of both of those as, exoskeletons or lazy vehicles. And either one works. Uh, so how we use that is the right questions to be asking. So to me, a research assistant that can look stuff up and a clinical supervision mentor that can help you connect disparate ideas and hold a consistent standard for you. I think those are really good use cases. And full transparency, I'm building those and want to bring those to market. I think there's a lot of people who want to use Claude to be their chief of staff. And there's these compelling, Facebook videos on, let me make you a chief of staff and a chief marketing officer and a team of 5. I don't think hypnotists need those. I think hypnotists need to figure out a lot of other things before they need a chief of staff. So I think early stage, helping them navigate a lot of the stuff that a supervisor would do if they were a marriage and family therapist, if they were a psychiatrist or a psychologist, what they would be getting in residency. I think helping build that space is great. Helping them find, again, like I said, the disparate ideas and combine the themes and patterns that make all these different techniques coalesce into a set of patterns that make sense. Those are the kinds of things where it's going to help see strategy and match patterns. That's where it's going to be great.
Recently, you've announced an AI closed model rather than an open model with specific training data called Sage, and you've been, let's say, giving clues and kind of planting let's say, seeds over the last few years. Tell us about the clues that you've been laying before you actually tell us what Sage is all about.
Sure. So yeah, I've definitely been laying Easter eggs around and hints and clues since maybe 2018 or 19, something like that. That's when I first started getting patents in AI tech, was right around then, and had started putting things out, like our logos being a couple different color hexagons, but always hexagons. Why we went from HypnoThoughts Live to HT Live, why we kept that name even when the HypnoThoughts forum went away. A bunch of little things that we've been doing. When I did the Scriptnosis program, there were a couple Easter eggs in there. But I've been putting these Easter eggs out all along the way for all these years because I wanted to be able to conclusively prove to all of you today. I mean it when I say I've really been thinking about the ethics of this for a long time. I've really been thinking about the choices and the implications and the butterfly effects that may or may not happen. And I've been waiting for the right technology to become available to launch some of these endeavors. So the idea, and part of it was, as I was coming up with all these ideas and working on it and sketching it out, I couldn't build a lot of it yet because the technology wasn't available. And so it was an opportunity for me to build creatively and show where we're headed with all this. So the reason so what Sage is an AI system that's built on, by a considerable margin, the largest data set on hypnosis anybody has. And it's organized in a way that's smart, so that it's designed all about respecting the intellectual property of all the contributors. It respects authorship. It helps teach students. It pays the content creators. It does all the things ethically right that we would want it to do. That, like I said, respecting the intellectual property and the history of hypnosis and showing its work on that being foundational to that. So we built out this whole AI system, and because it's going to require so much trust from so many of you, and because it is such a new thing, I wanted you guys to be able to see, look, when I say I've thought about how to respect your intellectual property, understand that I was putting that down in a logo during COVID so that you would believe me today. So that's the kind of stuff I've been playing with here.
I think that's a fair point, because I was at the town hall that you did where the questions were coming up, and I think there is definitely an air of suspicion when it comes to AI, partly because
Sure.
of how these AI models have been created by essentially plagiarizing a lot of other people's work to kind of
Yes.
train the intelligence. And I guess one concern that a hypnotherapist is that if they're using a closed model, are they kind of training that model to be smarter for other people rather than actually getting the benefit for themselves?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. And so to explain how I've built this, and you and I have talked about it a bit. Um, so what I did was I took all the data from hypnothoughts.com, the online forum that I had, and I took all the data from HypnoThoughts Live, all the recordings from those conferences. And I mapped and I took all of those things and I broke them down into the individual idea segment. So not a whole lecture gets loaded. Each idea in the lecture gets broken down and each one is connected to the source. Each one is where to find it, who said it, when, all that is still there. But now all these ideas get to be mapped spatially based on what's similar to each other. And once I did that, I then had the ability to navigate that multidimensional space. And so like ideas are near each other. And because I already have so much content, I've hit the critical mass where this thing can be super duper smart. And that means that when I partner with, say, you or whoever it is that has content, when I partner with them, this AI Sage doesn't need to ingest the intellectual property of these third-party content contributors. So those content contributors can see in the contract, in the architecture that I publish, in everything, their data doesn't get ingested into the AI. It stays in what's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. But basically, think of it as it stays on a clipboard right next to the hive mind. And it can read that and say, oh, this is Adam stuff. I've seen Adam at HypnoThoughts Live a couple times. So I know these are the kinds of things he's thinking about. And this thing he's talking about here really fits there. And so it can speak intelligently and connect the dots without stealing your work. So you get paid when someone buys your content. You have a system that's smart, intelligent, tests, supports, quizzes, mentors and tutors, and it does it in a way that respects and benefits all the content contributors. And everyone has their own sage, so it remembers the conversations you're having, and it only has access to the courses you have the rights to and purchase.
That makes sense. So if I ask a devil's advocate question, because a lot of people will be quite familiar with ChatGPT,
Mhm.
maybe Gemini, maybe Claude, but ChatGPT is kind of, let's say, more widely kind of understood.
Yep.
What would be the additional benefit of using a closed model like
Yeah.
Sage as opposed to an open model that has access to, let's say, way more information than perhaps what exists in a closed model?
Yeah. So it has more information, but it's more average information. So think of ChatGPT is really good. It's great. But it's also equally trained on a bunch of wrong stuff and misconceptions about hypnosis.
Mm.
And it doesn't have the depth of information that we have. So because we have different signals, and if to kind of think of it this way, I have Richard Nongard. I have Richard Nongard typing on hypnothoughts.com a debate back and forth with Roy Hunter, in 2007 about regression. Then I have Richard Nongard teaching a 1 hour lecture on regression from 2022. And I have a couple of his other conversations, and I have bullet point other pieces from the HypnoThoughts Live library where he's teaching full courses and all those things. So I have all these different versions of Richard Nongard talking about and teaching this topic. The density of that and how the different styles, a debate versus a lecture versus a 2 day course, all of those um, create a synergy that, from a training data perspective, is really strong. So the system now has examples, has arguments, has why I disagree with A or B. And from a training data perspective, it means the model gets a coherent understanding of these topics. And because of the way we designed the vector database, the way it connects all of the things into a like all of the things, like hundreds of thousands of things, like more than the Bible plus Harry Potter plus Star Wars, like a lot of content that creates a lot of coherent storytelling. All of those pieces into one single model of hypnosis, that is better than a chat GPT that's reading a Reddit thread and a whole bunch of other people's YouTube channels that are suspicious. HypnoThoughts has debates from active practitioners and lectures from international conferences. And so the standard of information going in is a lot higher. So it's a garbage in, garbage out.
Perfect. And if there's any hypnotherapists that want to experience Sage firsthand, what's the best way that they would go about that?
So September 1st, we're giving a free trial. And it's going to be on hypnothoughts.com. And it's going to be 2-week free trial. And when you interact with Sage and just start talking to it like a colleague and not like a Google, when you start treating it like a person at the conference and start asking real questions to it, the people who are beta testing it right now are saying it's night and day from ChatGPT when you talk about real clinical understanding. So September 1st at hypnothoughts.com, people are going to get to play with this thing.
I'll make sure I put the link in the show notes. And just before we wrap up, tell us about the dates for Atlanta.
Yeah, so we are going November of 2027. So the 27 conference will be in November instead of July. And it is November 6th, 7th, and 8th, or 5th, 6th, and 7th. Whatever that weekend is. It's right there. It's going to be so fun. The space we have, like I said, Stephanie and I are going in a couple weeks, and we're going to shoot some footage just to show you guys what we're going to be able to do in Atlanta this year is going to be awesome. And we are thrilled with the support we're getting and the feedback that we've already gotten from people so far.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to visit, and yes, about 13 months from now. It's 14.
14 months.
November, and looking forward to that. Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the on the show. And is there any links, any websites that you'd want to point people towards?
Hypnothoughts.com is the best place to find anything about me.
Awesome. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of The Hypnotist. If you've enjoyed this episode or got some value from it, please give it a 5-star rating and review. And maybe you know someone that would also benefit from this particular episode, in which case share the episode with them so they can also get the benefit too. And if you would like to listen to this episode where it's just the hypnosis, so no intro, no outro, no explanation, just the hypnosis and completely ad-free, there will be a link in the description where you can subscribe at a very low cost and only get access to the hypnosis. So if that's of interest, please check that out. Thank you again for being a regular listener of The Hypnotist, and I'll see you again soon for more.